Hey guys, this is Stephanie and I am Stacks on Stacks on Stacks. I'm coming to you guys with day 6 of the 7 of 7, sponsored by Book Roast. She's amazing. I will link her channel down below so you can check her out. Basically, we have 7 days with 7 different topics, and then you're supposed to pick your top 7 of that topic each day. Now again, per usual, these are in no particular order. They are just a top 7. Also, I'm going to try and not use books over and over, but I kind of used a lot of them over today because they're just books that were so good and I wasn't expecting it, because today's topic is books that exceeded your expectation. So all of the books I'm going to talk about today, I either had a somewhat low expectation or I wasn't 100% sure. I was apprehensive, something along those lines about reading these books. So we're just going to dive right in. First one I have is The Dresden Files by Jim Butcher. And I'm just going to go with the whole series. This is the first book, Stormfront, but I would say the entire series, my brother-in-law talked about them and he just talked about them, and he thought they were just the best thing in the world. And I was like, they're not going to be that good. They're going to be disappointing and I'm going to be disappointed in these books. So I was just prepared to not think they're great. And then he also had told me the first 3 books aren't the best books. They're just okay, but they get a lot better. So my expectation for these books were like, whoo. But I read the first book and I was like, actually, this is pretty good. And then I read the second one and it was better. And he is right. The series does get better, but I feel like it starts out pretty good. I would agree as well. The first 3 are my least favorites, but that's just because it gets better, not because they are not good. Basically, we're following a wizard who lives in modern day Chicago. So he advertises himself in the Yellow Pages that he is a wizard, but he doesn't do parties and tricks and things like that, or pull a hat out of a rabbit or anything like that. But he introduces us to a world of fae and vampires and magic, and it really is interesting, all the people Harry comes across and how he becomes their friend and then he drags them across the whole series, and we'll see them for 10, 15 books. And I think it's fantastic that the character grows and he changes and the characters around him grow and change and he's not stagnant. When you have a book series that is 15, 16 books long, you cannot have stagnant characters or I'll stop reading your books. Another book that exceeded my expectations would be Anyas Ghost by Vera Brosgol. Now, I don't know exactly what I was expecting from this book, but I wasn't expecting to read it in one sitting and completely enjoy it. This is a graphic novel that is about a girl named Anya whose family came from Russia, and she's basically just trying to fit in as a normal American teenager. So she's pretty disgruntled and grumpy, and she wants to hide the fact that she has this proud Russian heritage. And in the book, she comes across a ghost, and she might learn a few lessons from this ghost. But I thought the pictures were beautiful. I thought the story was beautiful, and I really, really did enjoy it. And like I said, I read it in one sitting. So if you want something good and quick, this is the one for you. The next book I have to talk about is the Selection series by Kiera Cass. Now, I honestly picked this book. Boy, it's kind of reflecty. You can kind of see it there a little. I don't know. I picked this book up in the library because I saw it and it was a girl in a pretty dress. And I was like, oh, a girl in a pretty dress. I'm in the mood to read a book about a girl in a pretty dress. Now, I wasn't 100% sure what to glean from this, but I grabbed it and I had it sitting on my kitchen table, and my niece, who at the time was probably 12 or 13, comes by and she's like, oh my goodness, I just read that book. It was so good. And it's not that my niece is stupid, because she's not, but trusting the opinion of a 12 or 13-year-old, I was like, oh great, I'm not going to like this book. But I already had it and I was ready to read it. So I was like, I will just read it. And if it's horrible, then I'll forget, or something like that. So I actually read it, and I didn't read it in one sitting, but I read it in just a few because it's a very quick read, and I loved it. I thought it was fantastic. I could not wait to get the next book in the series. I was like, oh my goodness, I did not see this coming. This book was great. It was fun. It was clever. It was different. It was a spin on dystopian that you don't normally see. It's like The Bachelor, only with royalty in a dystopian society. And I really liked the spin. It was predictable because, well, It's just predictable, but I still really enjoyed it despite the fact that it was predictable. The second book, not so much. It was typical middle book syndrome. And then the last book I did enjoy as well. It was a little more serious, but it was still predictable but good, and I liked it. I feel like this is one of those books that you hate to admit that you liked, but I'll admit it. I liked it, but not the last two books. I kind of don't acknowledge those. I just acknowledge the trilogy. So the next book I have to talk about is Station 11 by Emily St. John Mandel. Now, if you watch this channel a lot, you might be sick of me talking about this book already, but if you read this book, then you can share with me the enjoyment I have about this book. Basically, this is a book that is following a band of actors and musicians that are traveling around a futuristic dystopian society from village to village, you know, bringing joy and entertainment and stuff like that. The reason it is a dystopian society is because a virus has come and has wiped out over 80% of the earth. Maybe it was 90%. I can't remember now. But lots of people, they all dead. It's kind of how society is rebuilding itself, in addition to mostly being from the point of view of the people in the traveling troupe, but it is actually from 6 points of view. So we do have other points of views as well. And it's from back when the virus was spreading to like the present day. And it's a good book. And I know it sounds boring. Every time I describe it, people are like, that doesn't sound interesting. It is. It is. It's just, I don't want to give things away because the surprise is the best part, but it was enjoyable. I'd heard about it from, I want to say Clockwork Reader and Reagan from Peru's Project. I don't know if I heard about it. And maybe Emily Fox from Emily Fox's books, or Emily Fox Read Books. I can't remember her name of that channel. I might have heard it from her too, but I'd heard about it and they were really vague about it. And then they're doing what I'm doing and just raving about it, and it lands in every tag and everything and all the time. And I'm like, well, it must be good, or they probably wouldn't have it in tags a year after they've read it. So I was surprised. It did exceed expectations, basically because I did not know what to expect because everybody's been so vague about this, but it was excellent. Next one I have to talk about is One Dark Throne by Kendar Blake. Basically, this one surprised me because I really didn't like the first book, but I loved the second one. The first book was really slow. I spent the first 75-80% of the book like forcing myself to read it and being like, there has to be a payoff of sorts. I just felt like the first book was slow, and there was some world building and there was some character building for sure, but I just felt like we were just treading water. Like, we're not actually going anywhere. We're just going to talk about these characters for a while. And then we're going to talk about this character. We're going to talk about this character, this and this and this. Boring things, and nothing's ever going to happen. And that's how I felt. Then the last, 20% of the book, it's like action, action, things happen. And the plot finally moves in a forward direction. But I don't like that in books. So I didn't like that book. But when One Dark Throne was supposed to come out, there's all this hype. And I think I watched one review. I couldn't tell you by who. And they said, this is better than the first one, but they liked the first one, but they said this one was better. So I was like, okay, I'll see if the library has it. If they have it, I'll read it. Of course they had it. So I read it, and I wouldn't say like it was a 5-star read for me, but it was just so much better than the first one. I really appreciated that. And then all of that work that they put into that first 75% that I thought was so slow and awful just paid off, because you had to have that background in order to enjoy the second book. I do not think that this series is suffering from second book syndrome, which is great because this book surprised me. Definitely exceeded my expectations. Next one I'm going to talk about is The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid. Again, I've talked about this one numerous times already, but I'm going to talk about it again. Basically, we're following Evelyn Hugo. She is like a Hollywood blonde bombshell. She came to fame in the 50s, and then it follows her career through present day and her 7 husbands. Basically, it talks about why she married each husband and then why each marriage ended. And then they have like news bulletins that cut in, and they're like, Evelyn Hugo got divorced for the 3rd time. That woman just cannot keep a man. But then you know the real reason of why she got divorced, and it's insanely interesting. It's basically told in flashback as well. They're very clear about what's present and what's past, which is very good. But I didn't know what to expect of this book. I'd heard about it on Drinking by My Shelf, and she loved it, but she also talks about a lot of books I've never heard of. So when she was raving about this one, and the next month she raved about it again, I was like, I'll give it a shot. I mean, it sounded interesting enough, but I didn't know like too many details. But again, the details are what makes the book great, but the surprise of the details is what makes it fun to get there. So I'm not going to tell you about it either. You're going to have to read it if you want to know more, because You'll probably enjoy it. It was a great read. It definitely exceeded all my expectations because I didn't have high expectations, but maybe that's why I enjoyed it. And the last book I'm going to talk about is The Host by Stephanie Meyer. I think most people have heard about this book. Basically, this is the same chick who wrote Twilight, which is why I had such low expectations. Now, I know a ton of you guys absolutely love Twilight, and it's what got you reading, and I am glad that it was the instigation of your reading. I think that's great. However, they're not good books. Like, they're not well written. I read those books, I was probably like in my late 20s, I'm guessing. Maybe mid to late 20s, somewhere in there. And I think I read the first book and I was like, yeah, this is really bad writing. Like, it interested me that the vampires were different. They weren't like other vampires in other books, and I kind of liked that. But I felt like the main character, Bella, was flat and uninteresting and quite honestly irritating. And then the writing was just bleh. And I was like, gross. I believe I read the second book because my friends were like, you have to read the second book. The third movie's coming out soon. It took me a long time to get through the second book. She irritated me more than anything during that book. The third one was kind of boring. It was very middle book syndrome to me. And then the last one I actually liked. It was the first one that I liked. And maybe I liked it because it was the end and there was not going to be any more. Who's to say? It was not good writing. So when I came across this one, after I read those 4 books, I was like, this book is going to suck and I'm not going to read it. But my friend was insistent. She said, no, this is a sci-fi book and it's not like that one. It's different and it's really good. And I'm like, all right. So I gave it a shot. And what I actually did is I decided to listen to this book because I kind of wanted to read it, but it's a thick one. And I was like, I don't want to waste my time reading another book that I'm not going to like, especially when it's like the size of 3 of the books that I've already read by this author. So I listened to it, read by Kate Redding, and it was fantastic. The writing was great and the plot was interesting and well executed and everything. The writing was good. And I was like, how did she do that? And then do this? Definitely exceeded my expectations. Basically, The Host is about aliens that have taken over the earth, and what they do is they kind of get put inside of the human body, an alive human body, and then you can see them in the ring of the eye. Ooh. And then they take over, and we are their host, and they take over our body, and then they keep living life, walking around like normal, except that there's an alien inside. Well, usually it's a living body, but the person like has given up or is not in there anymore. But in this body, Melanie is not giving up, and Melanie is going to fight and take back this body, whereas Wanda, who is our little alien, is like, no, I want this body, and she's too nice to really kick Melanie out, but at the same time Wanda is the one in control. So it is this back and forth battle between the two of them, and then things happen. I don't even know how much I can tell you. It's really fun, it's really interesting, it is well written, and if you hated Twilight, you will probably like this book. That is it. Those are the top 7 books that I have read that I felt exceeded my expectations. I am going to admit it was really hard to make this list. Again, on my paper in front of me, I probably had like 19 books listed and I had to like cross them out, and then I added one, I'd cross it out because there's so many books that I think I picked up thinking it's going to be fine, and then it was fantastic. And I just wanted to put them all in there, just all of them. So I was really, really excited that I got to narrow it down to these 7. I wanted to know what book exceeded your expectations. I want you guys to leave a comment with what book you thought was the best improvement from what your expectations were to what it actually was. Please, please comment down below. I love your guys' comments. They make my day. Also, feel free to like, feel free to subscribe, feel free to share if you want to share. I would appreciate any of it. Normally, I post videos on Tuesday, Fridays, so this is where you will find me on those days. But I have one more day of the 7 of 7, so you will all get to see me tomorrow. Goodbye!